What got quiet all of a sudden? There's some great music going there. Good morning. My name is George Prest. I'm the CEO of MHI, the sponsor of ProMat. And I want to welcome you all to day 3. And we've got a big day ahead of us. Right after our talk here today, presentation today, up on the show floor, the show will open and you'll find the ProMat show and the Automate show. Your badge gets you into both shows. For ProMat, we've got over 950 exhibitors and almost 400,000 square feet of exhibitions. And with Automate, the combined show is over 1,300 exhibitors and over 500,000 square feet. So it's going to be a big day today. At 1 o'clock, we've got Magic Johnson in this room, and I think there might be a few more people in the audience at 1 o'clock. So we're excited about that. That's going to be a great presentation. And then at 4:30 this afternoon, we're going to kick off our industry night, and that is a new program that we started a couple years ago, and we're going to be giving away the Innovation Awards. We also will be giving away what we're calling a trip of a lifetime that has a $30,000 value. And then to top it all off, Dana Carvey is going to be bringing entertainment to us. So we're looking forward to it. It's going to be a big day. The other thing about the industry night is there are tickets available, and you can get them at the registration booth. They're $50 a piece, and all of the money goes to our education foundation. So if you're interested in getting a ticket, there are still some available. So with that, I'd like to start introducing you to 2017 MHI Annual Industry Report, which we're calling the Next Generation Supply Chains: Digital, On-Demand, and Always On. So one of the things I'd like to do, though, to set it up is just give you a little background. In 2013, MHI's Board of Governors authorized and funded what became known as the U.S. Material Handling and Logistics Roadmap. And what happened with that is that there were 4 regional roundtables that had experts from government, academia, end users, and manufacturers, our members. They were in the Northeast, the Southeast, the Midwest, and on the West Coast. And from that came a report that was introduced at the 2014 MODEX show. And that report has really gotten a lot of traction. And one of the things that we thought when we got done with that report is we didn't want it to be one of those reports that is done and is a nice report and then gets put up on a shelf. So the thought was that we would develop an annual report that would literally take a look at what's happened in the last 12 months and go out to the end users and see what's happening in terms of these technologies that people were looking at. The roadmap was, I should have mentioned, the roadmap was a look at where are we now and where are we going to be in 2025. So the annual industry report is now taking where are we today. And for example, when it came out in 2014, there were some new technologies that were talked about that were kind of nebulous and fuzzy, and they were autonomous vehicles, drones, 3D printing. And now today, here we are, and they're a part of our lives. So just in 4 years, that has grown exponentially. And so this year's report, what we did is, the other thing I forgot to mention is in our report, we collaborate with Deloitte Consulting, and this is, again, the 4th year that we've done it. This year, there were over 1,100 manufacturing and supply chain professionals that were surveyed. 50% were C-suite and upper management. 47% reported annual sales in excess of $100 million, and 10% reporting $10 billion or more. But one of the important things in that number is the 47%, in my opinion, because that represents what most of you, they're smaller type businesses. So 47% of the respondents were $100 million or less, which is a significant portion of our, the members here. The report also contains an update on 9 technologies identified as the drivers of the next generation supply chains. And in keeping with our goal to identify the new and emerging trends, there is a discussion around how traditional supply chains are transforming into digital, on-demand, and always-on supply chains. So today, what we'd like to do is we've got a panel, and this panel is a very distinguished panel that actually is using these technologies. And we thought it would be much more interesting to have you hear what these people are actually experiencing with these new technologies. So I'd like to introduce our panel. Venkataramani is the Director, COE, for Digital Supply Chain for SAP. I sat up all night trying to get his name right. Randy Bradley is the Assistant Professor of Information Systems and Supply Chain Management for the University of Tennessee. Alan Omling, VP for Corporate Strategy, UPS Supply Chain Solutions. Stacy Hoda, VP, Supply Chain Distribution, Walmart Canada. Mario Adami is VP, Corporate Warehouse, Albertsons. Jay Kim is Chief Strategy Officer for Upskill. And Amy Augustine is the Senior Manager for Reverse Logistics, US Cellular. And I want to thank you all for being here. My co-moderator is Scott Sopher, who's a principal and leader of Deloitte Consulting's global supply chain practice. And Scott and I and his team and our teams have been working together for the last 4 years developing these annual industry reports. And Scott, would you give us update on this year's report?
Sure. Thank you, George. And again, good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Scott Sopher, and I'm happy to provide you kind of a brief summary of the 2017 report. So why don't we get started on some of the numbers. So we did the survey, as George mentioned, and when it comes to adoption rate of the 9 technologies surveyed, cloud computing and storage, along with sensors and automatic identification, are leading in terms of adoption rate at 50% and 49% respectively. It's interesting, over the next 2 years, the adoption of those 2 technologies is expected to increase to 74% and 71% respectively. We also asked questions about the adoption over the next 5 years of these technologies. Robotics and I'll just touch on a couple of them. Robotics and automation adoption, which is at 37% today, is going to rise to 71% over the next 5 years. IoT adoption, again, 24% today, expected to hit 81% in 5 years. And predictive analytics, just 17% today, expect to jump to 79% over the next 5 years. This rise in adoption over the next 5 years explains why 80% of the survey respondents believe that the digital supply chain will be the predominant model in 5 years. And in fact, 16% of the survey respondents say that it already is today. So let me just stop. So 80% of the survey respondents believe digital supply chain will be the predominant model within the next 5 years. I think that's pretty stunning statistic that came out of the survey. 92% of the respondents, and this is up from 75% just 2 years ago, believe that one of these 9 technologies that we surveyed could be a source of competitive advantage or disruption in their industry over the next 10 years. And the top technologies respondents say could be a source of disruption or competitive advantage are kind of listed on the right-hand side of the slide there. Robotics and automation's at 61%. Just 2 years ago, it was only at 39%. Predictive analytics is showing at 57%. Just 2 years ago, it was 38%. Driverless vehicles and drones is at 54%. Just 2 years ago, it was at 30%. So as George mentioned, more and more people see these technologies playing a more and more critical role in the material handling and supply chain aspect. If you look at terms of the financial commitment companies are making, more and more are upping their ante, their financial commitment to these emerging technologies. 53% of the companies surveyed will be spending at least $1 million in these emerging technologies. When we asked the same question 2 years ago, the number was 42%. In fact, 2% of the companies will be spending over $100 million on these technologies. But as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, significant barriers and challenges still remain. 56% believe cybersecurity is a top barrier, and 63% believe hiring and retaining a skilled workforce is going to be their biggest challenge. So how are firms kind of preparing for this next generation supply chain? 54% are partnering with vendors to understand the benefits of these technologies. 50% are training their workforce. 48% are recruiting different skills and talent to align with these future technologies. And the one statistic I found kind of remarkable was that 46 are piloting the new technologies. That's basically 1 out of every 2 respondents from the survey say that they're testing and piloting these technologies today. So, these technologies have arrived. Let me just spend a minute or two just to kind of go through a little more detail in terms of how these technologies are coming together to really kind of create the next generation supply chains and how they'll impact companies in the near term. As I noted earlier, 80% of the survey respondents believe that digital supply chain will be the predominant model within 5 years, and 16% believe we're already there today. So supply chains are evolving. So if you look on the left-hand side of the slide, everybody kind of has seen the serial supply chain. Supply chains, we believe, are evolving from kind of the traditional model of the series of linear, individual, desynchronized links, and where it's evolving into is a more connected, harmonized network of trading partners. We call it the digital supply network. And we believe this next generation supply chain, or this digital supply network, has 3 distinct characteristics. It's digital, it's on demand, and it's always on. And this transformation to a digital supply network really alters the fundamental characteristics of a traditional model and has completely changed the game. So we believe continuous and automated readings from material handling equipment in the future, and even now, could be translated to a digital state and using predictive analytics, probably residing in the cloud, could recommend or enable different actions to be taken within your warehouse operations. It's clear that technology is driving this change, but it's not a single technology. It's really a combination of all these technologies, 9 technologies highlighted in the survey. So the next generation supply chain, as I mentioned, is going to be always on and on demand in order to meet kind of the customer expectations going forward in the future. We have a new aspect in the survey this year. It's around the topic of smart city logistics. Just by a show of hands, how many people have kind of heard the term smart city logistics? Okay, so we kind of introduced this in the survey this year for the first time. Smart city logistics is the idea that logistics providers can leverage many of the innovations and technologies the report has been tracking for the last 4 years, really to find solutions to urban congestion and freight and parcel distribution, both into and out of urban areas. So we asked a question about how many people are aware of smart city logistics, the topic itself. 50% of the survey respondents said they're aware of it, but only 6% really have begun to collaborate to create new opportunities such as urban distribution centers, logistics decoupling points, or city logistics hubs. We see this as a major opportunity that could impact supply chains over the next 10 years. Now let's get viewpoints of the panel, some of the real-world implications from these findings. George?
Thank you, Scott. So now we've given you all the background, and now it's time to talk about real-world applications. And so we're going to start off with the Internet of Things, which the survey identified as one of the top innovations. In fact, 55% of survey respondents say it can be a source of either disruption or competitive advantage for next-generation supply chains. Venkat, give us a definition of the Internet of Things and explain why it's so important to next-generation supply chains, if you would, please.
Yeah, thanks, George. There's a lot of buzz around the terminology Internet of Things, IoT, or Internet of Everything. The way I define Internet of Things, it's an ecosystem of things that have sensors embedded in them that's exchanging information with the World Wide Web or the Internet automatically without human intervention. That's the way I define IoT. And IoT can really be a disruptor, but also a competitive advantage for customers. We at SAP work with a lot of customers that bring to us use cases around IoT. It's 8:45, 9 o'clock in the morning, so coffee is probably a good topic. We work with a large coffee provider, and they actually were embedding sensors in their coffee machines. And they can actually look at which pods are actually being used. The initial investment in the sensors was to see if the coffee machines were working appropriately. What they started to find out is that they could figure out which particular pods in which geography were being used more. So people have a preference for mocha on the West Coast, maybe caramel latte in the East. They could take that information and then basically reroute their distribution. So it fundamentally transformed the way they were looking at IoT. They started off with one use case, but it actually led them to another location as part of their journey, and it's really transformed how they look at supply chain and supply chain management.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, sensors are now embedded in everything from our phones and our cars to water valves and parking meters. In fact, we were talking last night, and I was mentioning that we just had a digital water meter put in our neighborhood at our house, and so now they drive by and I get my bill faster. So it's I'm not sure it's all good, but Randy, what are some of the ways that supply chains are using this technology?
So George, a couple of things that we're seeing. One category is when you think about track and traceability of your products, whether the sensors are actually on the products or whether the sensors are on the packaging themselves. It's one thing to know where something is. It's another thing to know what it's actually been exposed to. And so that's one category. Another categorization where I see is think about your most expensive element of your supply chain, which is your human capital. And so Cintas is really leading the way with respect to embedding sensors into the uniforms and the work products that your personnel are wearing in the facilities, such that you have the ability to not only track where they are in real time, but also know whether they're taking the most efficient route to perform a task or if they're under any type of duress. We've all seen it when you're in a hot warehouse on a summer day, incidents happen. But what if you could get ahead of that incident by ascertaining and assessing and analyzing in real time what each individual is actually experiencing or undergoing as they're in the environment trying to perform the work. But one thing I want to say about sensors is this. What we've seen with respect to the use cases is it seems to be very operational and to some degree tactical. But what we have to do to get beyond this is look at the use cases being more strategic. We always hear about the voice of the customer. But my question for you is, what about the voice of the product? Because the true competitive advantage is not so much at the upper end of the supply chain, but it's more downstream. If you can figure out a way to leverage sensors to get it closer to the consumer. One of the things that we saw in the case study was about supply chain event management, the ability to reroute dynamically as things change. Well, do we have to rely on the driver, or can the products themselves tell us what's actually going on in the space and environment in which they're in, and then allow you to be able to pivot as needed?
Yeah. Thank you.
Alan, the survey found that 50% of the respondents are aware of the smart city issue that I mentioned, but only 6% really have begun to collaborate on it. What is smart city logistics? What are some of the issues, and why should supply chain professionals care about it?
Yeah, I'm so glad that this made its way into the report this year. This is This is one of those issues that we might have heard about as supply chain professionals, but it's not top of mind because it's not acute yet. Smart cities in general are, think about the analogy of a smart operation. You have kind of a data infrastructure background, and you're connecting inbound and outbound to accounting, and all of these different components within your operation are connected. If you take that to smart cities, think about all of the services that a city provides, from healthcare, water, energy, logistics infrastructure. That's where we come in. And it needs to, what's unique about this is it's not one company can't come in and solve smart cities. It really has to be a collaborative effort of many companies working with the government. An example from UPS that's featured in this year's report is something that we started with the city of Hamburg. And it wasn't that UPS came up with this idea for these cargo cruisers or e-bikes. The city of Hamburg, their leadership came to us with a problem. And they said, we've got more and more deliveries into the city, and we have issues with congestion and with carbon, with pollution. So how can you help us? You still have to meet the needs of the customer, right? So that's, you still have to do that, but meet those needs, but reduce the carbon and congestion. And so we worked with a company to develop these e-bikes, and here's essentially how it works. The trailers that you're used to seeing going down the highway, they don't come into the city. They park on the outskirts of the city, and then we have these e-bikes that have an electric motor, and they have a pedal. There's someone actually pedaling, but the pedaling basically tells the motor to engage. And so the driver of the bike isn't feeling that load. It's got about a 77 cubic foot cargo capacity. And these e-bikes are going in and out, and you're not bringing these big vehicles into the city, and you're able to navigate. So the two big things that they wanted, or the three things: make service, reduce congestion, and reduce pollution. We're doing with this solution. And another forward-looking city, Portland, Oregon, we started that late last year, and it's just a good example of, this isn't rocket science, right? This is just industry and governments working together to provide a solution.
Alan, can you maybe talk about how maybe some of the technologies covered in the report maybe could be used to address these challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's a great point to look at these technology and how they come together in smart cities. You think about, if I'm going to have, let's say, an urban distribution center, right? If I'm going to have an urban distribution center, it's got to be a pretty small footprint, right? Because it's going to be expensive real estate. So I'm definitely going to have to use robotics and automation in that. But even before that, and I can't emphasize this enough, it's not about the technology first, it's about the process. Because it's not going to be the same solution necessarily for every community. Communities are unique. And so you're going to be developing, the key is that the public and private sector agree on what it is we're trying to accomplish, what the end goal is, and then business and industry can work together to solve it. We don't see today a lot of smart city projects going on in the US. And again, we're not seeing it because it's not acute, it's not top of mind. I have 100 other things to think about today. Why am I thinking of smart cities? But if you look at Asia, there's only over 275 smart city projects going on in China. There's a big project in Singapore. Why? Because it's already acute there. So now let's say, okay, well, should we worry about this? So let me just throw this by you. 9% of total retail is e-commerce today. We know that that's a lot of single shipments. We know that we're seeing increasing urbanization in the United States. So now let's take these two trends and start playing them out. More and more people going into cities. E-commerce, it's growing double digit. We all see it, right? What happens when it goes from 9% to 18% to 25%? The way that we're serving cities today is not sustainable. And we're going to have to look at how we use autonomous vehicles, drones, robotics, 3D printing, and other technologies to solve that issue. We need to start thinking about it today.
Thanks, Alan. Smart City are also looking at distribution network design for answers. Stacy, can you maybe describe how the ability to design distribution networks might help address some of the Smart City challenges as well?
Yes, you know, some of the information that Alan shared, I think, is really interesting to see what UPS is doing, some of the solutions they've come up with. If you take a look at the 2017 MHI industry report, it indicates that up to 25% of road capacity is being used for transport delivery of merchandise and goods. If you couple that with the trends that we're seeing in terms of population densities and smart cities, and then the congestions and some of the other challenges that Alan shared, we've got a real problem on our hands. In Walmart, we work really hard, and we're really committed every day to making life easy for working families, busy families that are dealing with these challenges in urban communities. A couple of things that we've offered. One is site to store. Have any of you ever shopped at a Walmart, Sam's Club, neighborhood market? It's so cool to just order online, head over to the store, pick it up, and today it's at no cost. Secondly, we've also offered options in urban communities and metropolitan areas where we've built small distribution centers for grocery pickup. So imagine on a Monday, you're working on your grocery list, you go online, you order groceries for the week. Near the end of the week, Thursday, Friday, you've scheduled a pickup, and we've got a professional shopper in these very small distribution centers that'll do the shopping for you. And I tell you, our associates are really excited about shopping and take pride in it, and some of them are just much more pickier than even the average customer. But it just makes it easy so that for us, our customers can spend that time elsewhere in their busy lives. There are other trends that are out there. There is a solution with autonomous vehicles, for example, that's being deployed in Washington, D.C. right now. And this robot is maybe knee-high, and for hyper delivery markets, you can say, for example, you want to order pizza at night, it's raining outside, it's snowing, you just don't feel like going out. Today, not next year and not 5 years from now, there's pizza shops that can fulfill your order, place it in this robot. This robot will deliver your pizza to you, it's still nice and hot. And what's so fabulous is that the more the robot travels, it understands the sidewalks, traffic patterns, it becomes smarter and smarter, machine learning. So these are trends that we're seeing to meet the needs of urban areas and smart cities.
Thanks, Stacy. Can you maybe just talk maybe in general in terms of how inventory and network optimization technology can impact the next generation supply chains?
Inventory and network optimization technology is really important. And I think there are financial benefits, service benefits, and sustainability benefits that will support the business case. In Walmart, we've gotten familiar with several tools out there in the market. And I tell you, there's some suppliers that have really figured it out. Along with predictive and prescriptive analytics that are now capability that you see in these tools, you can also simulate your supply chain and understand what the future ought to look like to meet the needs of your customers, as well as the service level commitments you may have. What these tools will also do is several things. First and foremost, will allow you to align or synchronize your supply chain with the supplier community. Secondly, there are benefits to productivity or production planning, I should say, and replenishment. So you're only ordering and buying what your customer needs, when they need it, and where they need it. There are also some benefits from a financial standpoint in terms of days on hand when you're using optimization tools. And many of us know even 1 day on hand, if you can have a reduction, can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars of inventory. Safety stock. There are many benefits. Fixed costs associated with activities to support suboptimized inventories. So at the end of the day, there's an opportunity to get more efficient, to eliminate investment in equipment, which also reduces miles and deliveries across the supply chain. So it's a terrific sustainability play as well.
Thanks, Stacy. The rise of IoT, the advancements in sensor technology, and the new analytic capabilities really is creating an opportunity for companies to better manage global supply chains, really through actionable intelligence. And in the survey, the adoption rate of predictive analytics is at 17% today, supposed to grow to 89% in the future. Randy, maybe you could touch on how predictive analytics is a critical enabler of the always-on supply chain.
Sure, I'm happy to do it. So if we think about predictive analytics, and even in this context of always-on digital supply chains, it really falls under a much broader umbrella that we refer to as digital business transformation. And with respect to digital business transformation, there are essentially two pillars that make it possible. One pillar we refer to as the operational backbone. That's going to be your transaction management foundation, which typically consists of most of your common enterprise systems. So whether it's your warehouse management system, your transportation management system, customer relationship management, supplier relationship management, those things you absolutely have to have, and you have to be getting maximum value from that. But on the other side, we call it the digital services backbone. The digital services backbone encompasses many of the technologies that we've discussed in the report, but it also has this ability to be able to aggregate data and collect it in real time, cleansing and distilling the data, and then determining what's likely going to happen as a result of what we've seen before. We've always talked about demand signals and allowing the demand signals to drive how we segment our supply chain, whether we're segmenting suppliers, customers, or even inventory. But the challenge is, do we always have a true demand signal, and are we missing out on what we sometimes refer to as that phantom signal or that faint signal? And so predictive analytics, and as she mentioned earlier, moving on to prescriptive analytics, allows us to tap into and identify patterns that we may not have known actually existed, so that we can truly understand where that faint or phantom signal is, and then drive the right behavior moving forward.
Great. Thank you. Mario, you're up. The survey found that adoption rates for robotics and automation adoption is to reach 53% within the next 2 years. In your opinion, what's driving this trend?
Yeah, good question, George. I think that organizations really understand how supply chains provide value to our retail environments, specifically when we're vertically integrated. So with that said, supply chains constantly are leveraging technology to not only improve service and quality aspects, but also improve costs. You know, really those three pillars, and we enable our retail environments to be more profitable. So if you look at the, if you kind of think about the, competitive landscape, and we all are competing for the same labor, right? The same labor challenge we're all faced with. And the trends in our labor market specific to process workers, if you look at the trends themselves, you've got increased wages, increased pensions, increased health and welfare, increased workers' compensation charges. So that full umbrella of the cost of an employee continues to increase. On the flip side, you've got automation, and the landscape of competition with automation and robotics is driving the cost of solutions lower and lower each year. The technology is advancing, but we get increased agility, increased reliability, and that all delivers value back to the supply chain. So for us at Albertsons, what we've noticed is kind of a clear shift in modular designs of some of these robotics and automation solutions. And these modular designs allow us to scale. Well, first, it reduces the entry-level price of getting into full case automation or full service automation. but it also allows us to scale it out with the business as growth dictates. And that's been a huge benefit. I think other organizations realize that and are starting to invest similarly.
Right. Yeah, we'll talk in a little bit about the workforce issue, but along these lines, one of the concerns out there, and we talked a little bit about it last year, is with automation, robotics taking away jobs. But in reality, what these robots are doing is they're really doing what we like to refer to as the dirty, dangerous, demeaning jobs. And the other thing about it is the robots and the automation, somebody has to design that, somebody has to manufacture that, somebody has to program that, somebody has to install it and maintain it and operate it. So really, you end up creating higher level jobs. So it ultimately becomes a better long-term thing for people, I believe.
So George, can I add to that
Sure.
just a moment? Because when we talk about robotics and automation, we've all seen the robots that are in the cage, and the goal is to separate the robot from the human. And now we've moved into this realm where we look at the cobots. Well, they're not necessarily in the cage. They may be standing alongside. But even then, it's still a bit what I call semi-automated, because we're still relying on the human factor to tell the robot what to do and when to do, and in some cases how to do. And granted, the robot can learn and then repeat. But what happens when dynamics change? And so what we're seeing in this next evolution of robotics is where robots become more self-aware, to where they begin to understand the person they're working with. It's almost like having a police dog assigned to a specific policeman. There are reasons why the dog doesn't go from police to police, because they learn the nature, the behavior, the characteristics of one individual. And then what happens is you get more productivity out of that robot. And so that's what we're beginning to see moving on into this next generation of robotics.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. The survey mentions that 61% of respondents see automation as a growing disruptor for firms. Venkat, what kinds of disruptions are they referring to, and how do you see automation addressing that?
It's a great question, George. You know, disruption is happening across the landscape. How many of you here took an Uber to get to McCormick Place today, right? Uber is an example. And I'm kind of dating myself a little bit here, but I've been in the automation manufacturing space for 30 years. Automation's always been top of mind for companies that are trying to optimize their business processes. But I think what's happened over the last 2 years or so is the transformational technologies like in-memory processing and sensors has allowed automation to be more flexible. What has driven that? It's really the customer of a lot size of one. You know, you have the omni-channel, you have people being able to go on the internet and actually design their own sneakers or their apparel. And you need to have a manufacturing environment that allows you to be flexible. I think where technology has come now is the ability to take your modular concepts, to be able to take the automation, to be able to do the kinds of things that will allow you to serve the customer of a lot size of one.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. The survey results indicate that the current adoption rate of robotic and automation is at 37%, is expected to skyrocket to 71% over the next 5 years. Mario and Venkat, what lessons learned should leaders consider before implementation?
Yeah, George, another great question. I think that when you step back and look at ProMat in itself is a great example of the variety of choice and options that we as operators or consumers, we have many, many options. So in my opinion, vendor selection is absolutely critical. There'll be, each one of us will have many, many options in regards to fulfilling our core requirements from a solution perspective, ranging from semi-automatic to fully automatic solutions. I think where the rubber hits the road is making sure you have a clear collaborative partnership with a vendor that really is going to understand the nuances of your business requirements, the full detail, and not just the cursory surface core competencies. Many of these vendors will embed themselves within your organization or within your operation and really understand these details. And I'd say areas that typically have room for gaps or are often left with a bit of a gap is areas around systems integration. So not just the systems that's going to drive the automation or robotics, but also how does it integrate with your other systems in your environment. The area of business intelligence, how is your management team now that is accustomed to maybe a conventional warehouse environment, how are they going to manage differently using the technology, right? And that is certainly a learning curve. I think the area of risk mitigation, so what happens when it fails and how do we continue to service our customers in those cases, that's an area that's not commonly fully explored. And then probably the last area that I'd recommend we all invest more time in is, and I'm particularly passionate about, is performance management. Really optimizing the performance of the systems and the technology that we purchase, and making sure that there's complete clarity between the vendor community and your collaborative partnership and you as the operator. So that whole area of vendor selection is critical to me. I'd say the second area that I think is highly underestimated is that of our human capital and the investment that is required up front to have a successful technology solution in place in our manufacturing and distribution environments. When we think about the change management process, we often rely on our vendor community to provide that on-the-job training as we implement the technology, and that's a mistake I've made and I've seen made in other operations where we're too dependent on the vendor community and we're not asking all of the right questions in regards to comprehensive training modules and a plan for execution. To mitigate that risk a bit, many of the large solution providers will offer options for them to either operate and or maintain the solution that's provided. So that's one option that us as consumers we can be considering.
Yeah, and Randy, when you talk about some of the disruptions and some of the things that you talked about too, Mario, is what I think is really critical, and this may be interesting coming from somebody who works for a technology company, but you really need to talk about three aspects of a project. It's people, process, and technology. And in that order, technology is not what you lead with. You look at the goals of a project, you look at where you desire to be at the end of the day, and then you work around the existing people that you have that run your operations to figure out how can I leverage a new methodology that's driven by technology to derive the outcomes that I'm looking for. And it's very critical to actually find the right partner that will work with you because most people will say their processes are very unique to them. And as a technology company, a lot of the technology vendors out there have worked with a varied type of industry, so they know some of the pitfalls in the adoption of technology. So it's really key to pick the right partner that can help you embark on that journey and do a crawl, walk, run. And I think, Mario talked about it. If you're failing, fail fast, learn fast. That's critical.
Right.
George, can I add to that real quick?
Sure.
I know that in addition, I think that was well said. I know many of us don't have $20, $40 million to invest in upgrading your networks or your supply chain. And so realistically speaking, there's got to be solutions out there to help depending on the size of your budget. And I think it's important to consider suppliers that can help you retrofit your traditional supply chain with semi-automated solutions to help you get there incrementally. I also think, and I'm such an operator, so I have to say this because I get into these discussions with engineers and the finance folks, but I think we've got to influence our finance and accounting brothers and sisters and the engineering teams to really look at these investments and to challenge risk models and ROIs and some of the standards that have been set on the accounting side and the engineering side. Because there are ways to make the business case, but I think an investment today in terms of your networking infrastructure and the hurdle rates and ROIs are different from yesterday's network. So I think it's an interesting argument where we've got to understand how to influence in that direction. Otherwise, we're gonna all be dealing with disruption and the opportunity cost associated with not making the investment today.
Mm-hmm.
Great points. And I would just add the change management thing that you mentioned, Mario, huge. It's really important to align the skill sets with the vendors and what you're trying to do, and that change management thing is really big. Moving on, smart eyeglass devices are being used in supply chain to reduce workflow time and improve training and ergonomics. We discussed this topic during last year's panel, and a lot has happened since then. Jay, can you explain some of the new and exciting use cases that have happened in the last year?
Sure, George. Smart glasses are really unique under the idea of wearable and mobile technology. Amongst the 8 technologies that were being described in the annual report, these stand out because this, more so than anything, touches on the people that are actually in the processes. And I think different panelists here have actually spoken about the importance of the human capital and the importance of people that are doing the work throughout the course of supply chain. And what we have seen is that that idea of needing to invest in people and enabling them and upskilling them to be able to move at the process that businesses actually demand nowadays is getting even more important. So it's being seen not only as a competitive edge, but it's seen as the next digital tool that is being deployed to equip the industrial workforce, the people that are in the loop. Smart glasses are standing out relative to other kinds of wearable devices out there because it has all of the different components of a smartphone, which is already a really useful tool in our day-to-day lives amongst us, those of us that are the knowledge workers. But if you target the industrial workers and the process workers, smartphones don't necessarily bring the fundamental value because it forces you to create disruptions in your processes. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that you have to hold the device and you have to interact with the device with touch gestures and other kinds of things like that as you're doing your day-to-day tasks. So by being able to incorporate the sensors and incorporate the technology and create a hands-free user experience is being recognized by some of the largest companies in the world as a real difference maker in their operations. So there are 2 case studies that I'd like to highlight. The first is a case study that was published in the Harvard Business Review recently by one of our investors and one of our largest customers, GE, in being able to deploy smart glasses to replace a paper-based pick list business process that they have within their healthcare manufacturing facility. So this was something that was being used by pickers that were picking the goods and kitting the goods to be sent to their shop floor. So not a full digital, not a lot of automation process. And that's a typical example of where smart glasses are really enhancing productivity, is targeting labor-intensive processes that are highly variable, things that may or may not be good candidates for automation today or full automation today at least. And these processes also incidentally tend to be error-prone. So being able to target those specific metrics and drive those down and enabling the worker to displace having to go to the workstation to understand what their next pick is or what the items are, going through the paper-based pick list and completely creating a digital experience that is head-worn and hands-free through smart glasses, created a process time improvement of 46%. Those are huge numbers. That's a game-changing number to anybody that's in this room. And people are starting to see that benefit just outside of the companies like GE. Another case study that is actually presented in the annual report is the other extreme: high automation, high throughput, third-party logistics company that's targeting e-commerce. So high volume of work that's being done, and even in those kinds of extreme, relatively digitized and a fairly automated environment, many of them are seeing benefits that range from about 10 to 25%. Simply by enabling a better user experience for the people, delivering the information that is pre-existing within your systems of record, whether or not that's in the warehouse management system or your ERP or what have you, and being able to effectively convey that information to the people in the loop Simply doing that is creating double-digit percentage gains in productivity enhancements. Over the last year, you also saw new companies that are in the smart glasses space introduce new devices into the market that are more adaptable to being able to run through the full shift, and it could be a 12-hour shift. It can be pretty rugged environment. So we're fully into the second generation of devices that are out in the market today. You're also seeing these smart glasses devices starting to interact with other wearable devices from companies like Zebra and Honeywell, the Bluetooth-enabled ring scanners, if you saw that on the show floor. Smart glasses are being paired with those kinds of systems to create even further enhance that hands-free order picking and fulfillment type of an experience. Looking broadly across the supply chain, you're seeing this across manufacturing, you're seeing this across maintenance, you're seeing this across material handling. So, it's no coincidence that there's an increased level of investment activity that's happening in the space as well. And companies like ourselves are getting better funded and getting larger in the process. Actually, today we announced an investment, our Series B investment, which had participation from two very large companies that have massive supply chains, and that's the Boeing company and General Electric.
Great, thank you. Amy, what are some of the ways that operations can use this technology?
Sure, George. So I'm going to build on what Jay talked about, but more specifically in my operation. So I deal with returns, and there's money in those returned assets. And so when you're dealing with not only cell phones, but a 900 SKU mix for accessories, I need to identify the condition of those phones and the condition of the accessories and make decisions with other folks on where they're going to be dispositioned. And so I can see the use of smart glasses at receiving to help folks identify the cosmetic condition of the phone, and based on that, it will follow a certain path down our path. So either test and repair, go back to the OEM, or we're going to sell it because we have no need for it. Same thing with accessories. With 900 SKUs, we need to be able to effectively sort them and sort them fast so we can re-commerce them. The second use case in our operation would be in the test and repair of devices. If the operator has these glasses on, they no longer need to look at work instructions or follow OEM instructions on a computer. And everything is shown to them on the smart glasses, which makes the repair of the device much more fast and efficient and probably improves quality.
Great, thank you.
Smarter driverless vehicles and unmanned drones are being used not only for the movement of material and product across facility, but for other real-time applications. Randy, maybe can you describe maybe some of the ways that this technology is being used not only today, but maybe how it might be used in the future?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we're seeing, which I think is pretty interesting, is using drones within the warehouse or the facilities for inventory tracking or inventory counting. Instead of having someone to go out and do this typical physical count, you now deploy the drones who actually go through the facility, whether they have attached barcode readers or whether they actually have RFID readers that can excite or interrogate the tags on the products in the facility, so you get an accurate count in real time. In addition to that, we're also seeing drones being used for surveillance purposes. Think about your yard management system. It's estimated that about 60% of the time or the life of a product between the time you bring it on your premise and the time you actually deploy it and dispatch it out to a distribution center or a retail outlet, 60% of that time is actually spent in the yard. But do you know what's happening while it's in the yard? And so we're seeing drones as a great use case for actually being able to surveil the yard. In addition to that, using it for security measures and security purposes, where periodically the drone will deploy throughout the evening times and actually go out. And so it requires less of a reliance on a standard security personnel, because drones can actually have the ability to alert personnel as needed rather than having someone who's idle the vast majority of the time. I think an interesting use case or an actual use of this is when you look at BNSF Railway, how they now deploy drones to go out and do inspections on the railway and on bridges. And what they've done, they've attached lasers to it, so you get actually a microscopic view of a rail so that you can determine ahead of time where there's potential for damage or a mishap, and you have the opportunity to get ahead of that. And so I think those are some of the ways where we're seeing the use. The future with respect to this is about right now, most of these are still semi-autonomous, where they still have to be indicated when to take flight. What we believe that's going to happen now is drones will become more self-aware, where it goes out on a mission on demand, and then it's either going to complete the mission or realize that it's running short of resources to complete the mission, goes back to its docking bay, recharges itself, and then deploys a colleague, we'll call it a colleague drone, if you will, who then goes on to resume this task or this mission.
Thanks, Randy. Alan, maybe you could talk about other technologies that have implications on supply chains.
Absolutely, and I want to coattail off of that the key here is that when we talk about drones, and I'm going to talk about 3D printing in a second, they're just tools, right? They're just tools, and it's fitting the appropriate tool to the appropriate application. You're not going to saw a log with a hammer, and so drones got a lot of hype, right? Oh, we're going to have millions of drones in the sky, and there was a lot of skepticism around it. Where at UPS, where we're looking at drones is, what about rural areas where we're driving 30, 40 miles between stops, or in places where the infrastructure isn't built out? So we're delivering vaccines in Rwanda via drone, and we're launching, we have a drone that we can launch from our package car in super rural areas. And if we can, in those areas, if we can cut out 50, 60 miles a day, that's time, cost, and carbon. That's a great thing. So now let me go to 3D printing, and I'll try to be brief, but that's not my strong suit.
We can tell, okay?
Right? So briefly with 3D printing, the first question is, so why are we talking about this at a supply chain conference? And we really think that 3D printing is not a manufacturing solution, it's a supply chain solution. It's all about on demand. And so the way that we look at it is, how can we integrate 3D printing as another tool to optimize supply chains globally? And so the use case that really got us into this is service parts logistics. We have over 950 field stocking locations around the world where customers store their critical parts. And we know, because those parts are stored in our facilities, there's a good portion of those that turn very slowly or don't turn at all. It's a big problem. And if we can bring a solution to help our customers reduce inventory, that's good, because we all know that inventory is the devil. And so we want to make that as low as possible. And so being able to take inventory where it makes economic sense and make it virtual and print on demand, that's a good thing. But there's a lot of hard work that has to happen before you put a product into virtual inventory. It has to go through testing and certification. Just like a typically manufactured product, you can't bypass those quality steps. Those have to happen first. And so that's what we're working on with our customers right now. The two other use cases that we're seeing quite a bit are custom goods. So whether it's an earpiece or custom insoles, you're going to see in the next couple weeks some big press releases on custom applications of leveraging 3D printing. And the third use case is what we call manufacturing as a service. And that is the ability for entrepreneurs to develop and produce only what they need very rapidly. So that's as quick as I can do it.
Good job.
Thanks, Alan. Amy, what's the value of these technologies from an operations perspective?
Sure, Scott. So they're very valuable to us. Currently, we use 3D printing in our operation, maybe in a limited capacity right now for creating testing jigs and repair jigs. But on my strategic roadmap, we are going to look at, can we use 3D printing to create parts that we need for repair? So today, right, I don't want a customer to have a back order for days because I don't have a repair part to fix their phone. So using 3D printing to get that part right away will save that customer, and that's invaluable to us. So we're going to be looking at this. It's on my 3-year map with our partners to see if we can make this happen.
Great, thank you. One of the major issues exposed in this year and last year's report is the barrier to adoption of all these great technologies caused by the workforce crisis. Jay, how are these technologies helping to address the challenges with the shortage of supply chain process workers?
Primarily, the people-facing technology, like wearables, is creating a more comfortable environment for people to do work by eliminating a lot of wasted motion and generally creating a better user interface than what people are dealing with today. And the training component and the onboarding component of new workforce can't be understated. Being able to drastically reduce the onboarding time of a new warehouse worker, for example, a picker from several weeks down to a handful of days, or being able to deploy them into the environment as quickly as they go through the basic classroom training is one of the drivers. The case study that was done, that was featured in GE, was 46% improvement was done actually with the person that was using the technology for the very first time.
Thank you, Jay. I hate that this is happening, but we're running out of time. But this is a topic that I really want to get on the table, and let's close with that. Randy, describe ways and how the technology can help address the skills gap among supply chain professionals and knowledge workers. I know this is one of your passions.
It is, and it's one of the things we've talked about is trying to educate the future workforce earlier. Oftentimes we think as high school or middle school, but I believe it's actually primary or elementary school is where we really need to start impressing upon them what our opportunities are in this particular industry. But in terms of our current workforce and professionals, we have too many task-oriented individuals in the workforce today. Too many people that only do what they're told to do and when they're told to do it and how they're told to do it, and we're not empowering them enough to actually make decisions that are going to add value not only to the organization, but to your end consumer. And so one of the things that these technologies allow you to do is to bring the relevant information to the right individual in the right context and in the appropriate amount such that they are empowered to make more decisions that someone up the line would actually have to make. And when you're able to do this, you're beginning to close this knowledge gap such that those individuals that you thought were simply operational in nature, all of a sudden starting along this shift to become more tactical in nature, which means that you free them up to do more value-added activities than what you had previously thought they were capable of doing. In terms of how do you attract the talent, you have to understand what the talent wants. The talent doesn't want a job. That was what their parents wanted and what their grandparents wanted. They want a challenge. They want an adventure. They want opportunities. They want variety. And here's the other thing you have to be mindful of. They are not committed to you. They're committed to what's important to them. They're committed to things that they're passionate about. So if you are not willing to give them that level of variety, and if you're not willing to cater to the passion such that it adds value to you, you may as well be ready to prepare them for your next competitor.
Right.
Very good.
Fantastic. Good job. And that's, we were talking last night, and it really is important. There's studies out there that talk about the generations that are coming up, that they will actually have up to 14 jobs in their career. And I mentioned that we've got 5 millennials in our house, and 2 of them are already halfway there. So, we're running out of time, and I apologize. We're not going to be able to have time for questions, but I do want to just talk a little bit about, so what should leaders be doing today regarding the workforce challenges? And I think what you've heard here today is to be forward-looking. What will your supply chain look like in 2022? Invest in innovation and leverage technology. Focus on the workforce. Hiring and training for next generation skill sets are critical. Collaborate with vendors, partners, industry associations, and academic institutions. Embrace the digital supply chain future. It's here. It's already happening. And if you're not embracing it, you're going to fall. You're already behind. And it's critically important. Get started. Think big. Start small and act fast. On behalf of MHI, I'd like to thank you all for being a part of the important conversation that will no doubt advance our industry. You can download a copy of this report at mhi.org, and if you'd like a printed copy, you can also pick one up at the MHI booth on the floor, and on the show floor at booth S3354. Again, if we could give a round of applause to our panel, I'd like to thank them for a great job. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
That was awesome. You did a great job.
Good job.